The auction gets to just 2 minutes remaining, and I'm like, what? 3, 2, 1. Congratulations, you just won the E7 NASA jet. What did I just do? Somehow, some way, this video is not clickbait. I know what's going through your head right now. You just opened up YouTube, you're on your phone scrolling, and you see this title and thumbnail. Buying an ex-NASA, one-of-a-kind prototype vertical takeoff and landing F16 fighter jet for $260. You would rightfully think that that is the biggest lie of a century and that it's some silly clickbait and I actually bought a NASA RC plane for $260. But what if I tell you that every part of that thumbnail and title is true and that everything I'm about to explain in this video is like real life? For the same price as a new tire you would put on your Honda Odyssey minivan sitting in your driveway, I got a 40,000 pound, one-of-a-kind NASA fighter jet. Let that sink in. We obviously have a lot to unpack here. It's more than just a story time though. This is episode 1 of like what will be probably a whole series documenting the purchase, the removal, the first start, the restoration, the what we end up doing with this plane series here on YouTube. So without further ado, let me explain what I bought. So once upon a time, it was about 4 a.m. and I was doing my weekly scan of all my auction sources looking for cool cars or airplanes to bid on. And what do you know, when I refreshed this one auction site, I was blown away at what I saw next. To my surprise, NASA, like the NASA, was unloading a ton of their old airplanes and parts and equipment and just all sorts of random stuff. And when I refreshed this one auction site in particular, I was blown away at what I saw. I found these 2 very unique looking aircraft, one of which I've never seen before in my life. I'll put up a picture of it. I'm guessing you haven't seen this plane either. It's because it is also one of a kind. In addition to that plane, they were auctioning off the C-141 Kuiper Observatory. This is getting really nerdy, but if you happen to know your airborne observatories, you would know that the C-141 was the precursor to the 747 SP Sophia. You guys know that plane, right? That one's the more famous household name. But before that, in the 70s and 80s, up until the early 90s, we had this C-41 Kuiper Observatory. And that plane with its massive 36-inch lens telescope that went deep into space actually made some incredible discoveries. One-of-a-kind piece of history that should be preserved, but instead here it is up for auction, unfortunately listed for scrap. Tragic. This complete plane, still full of so much instrumentation and the computer bays and all the cockpit and the avionics and the engines and everything, is up for auction with no reserve. Now unfortunately this plane had been sitting for 30 years at this point, parked at the Ames NASA Research Center in San Jose, California. What's crazy is Owen and I go flying over Moffett Field all the time, and these 2 planes were parked right down there on the ramp, and Owen actually like remembered them because not every day you see a Lockheed C-141 Starlifter, so he kind of saw it and went, you know, wonder what that is. And it was just parked there for years and years and years. But now they are up for auction and I can win them. So of course, who wouldn't be tempted at the prospect of winning a C-141 transport cargo plane that also happens to be a one-of-a-kind aerial observatory? Like, who wouldn't want that? Especially given the fact that it's gonna sell for pennies on the dollar. And it did just that. I was thinking about bidding on this thing until I looked up the dimensions of this plane and I realized that it would be virtually impossible to do anything with that plane. Even if you're just scrapping it, that's gonna be a monumentous project and one that I do not want to take on. And it ended up selling for, I'll put the screenshot up here, I think like 20,000 bucks. Too bad it was just parked for 30 years. It could have been preserved. Sophia luckily is at the museum 2 hours south of me in Tucson. It's good to see at least that one in a museum, but it's sad that this one is going to be scrapped. Okay, but moving on to that first funky, weird plane. Yeah, you guys have most certainly never seen that one before. Well, maybe you've heard of it. By the way, throughout this whole video, if anything rings a bell or any of you all watching have worked on these projects for NASA, please comment down below anything you know about these planes, because I can only do so much research on what's like publicly available there, but somehow, some way, my YouTube comment section is always a gold mine for people being like, oh yeah, I serviced that plane. I am the one who flew that plane. Like, it's crazy. But let's continue. So that weird looking Buffalo C8, yeah, that's actually a one-of-a-kind NASA project. It's called the QSRA, Quiet Short Haul Research Aircraft, and it was designed to navigate inner city airports in densely populated areas. So the whole point of this plane is that based on how the jet engines are configured on top of the wing, the idea is that they produce more lift as the air speeds over the top of the wing. So it gives it this very, very unique design, but also the specs are incredible. The plane did so well and it took off in such short distances that they put it on a dang aircraft carrier. That's this plane's claim to fame. There's pictures of it on the USS Kitty Hawk landing and taking off. The resulting performance was wild. 65 knot approach speeds were normal, but they could go as low as 50 knots. So meaning a stall speed of under 50 knots for a plane that has a maximum takeoff weight of 60,000 pounds. You also got takeoffs in just 664 feet and landings in 550 feet.
By a spiral climbing departure, which would be a typical type of maneuver used for most airports, or in the case of the military, the aircraft that touchdown, how short a distance takes to come to. Yeah, I'm ready.
And on top of that, the noise footprint was reduced by 80 to 90%, the study showed. So like, on all fronts, this seems like incredible breakthrough, yet for some reason, we completely abandoned all of this like design and research, right? You haven't seen a plane since in the US arsenal that has the jet engines mounted on top of the wing. Someone I'm sure can explain down below why we don't have planes that look like this despite these numbers looking so good. Anyway, there's the history of that plane. Crazy plane. Once again, I tried to bid on that one as well. I bid up to about $15,000, and then two other guys bid it up to I think $21,000. I'll put up a picture of it, but I mean, once again, it's a one-of-a-kind piece of history for just 20,000 bucks. Like, man, comment down below if I should have bought that one. But basically, both of these planes, the C-141 and this QSRA, they're just too big. What am I supposed to do with it? So long story short, I didn't end up winning either of these two planes, and I was bummed about it. I really wanted to get one of them, but I just couldn't do it. So I had to pass, and I thought that was it for the NASA auction until a few days later, I refreshed that auction once again, and they had one more plane up for grabs, and this time I wasn't gonna let it go. So up pops one more plane from this huge NASA liquidation sale. Someone within NASA clearly said,
all right guys, it's time we get rid of all of our old crap. Let's just throw it up for no reserve auction and clear out some stuff.
They've just been on a roll, retiring planes, getting rid of stuff. You guys obviously saw Sophia, they retired that. The DC-8, you guys saw that just got retired the other day. I'm sure that one's gonna be coming up for auction. I don't know, should I be buying a DC-8? Probably not. Might I bid? Maybe. I'm remembering all these other things too. They unloaded their fleet of the Falcon 20 jets. It's all around the country. It's not just California, it's not just this one base. So there might be more NASA things on the way. Anyway, let's get into it. So I refreshed the page and up pops this listing for a E7 test plane for scrap. Something like that. The most random, generic, non-descriptive title and description to go along with this plane and 6 pictures online. So I'm like, what the heck is this thing? What's an E7? I've never heard of that type of jet. It surely looks like an F16, but it's kind of different. It's not quite the same. So I'm like, I'm gonna get to the bottom of this thing. So what do you know? I pop it into Google, E7 NASA jet, and boom, Google lights up with random various search results, all dated in the 80s and 90s, back when this plane was the testbed prototype for this massive collaboration project between the US government, the Canadian government, and the British government. All entities contributed to make this project happen, and it was a research program to test the feasibility for creating a vertical takeoff and landing fighter jet, full-blown jet. Of course, there's the Harrier, but they wanted something like an F16 that could take off vertically. Oh, ring a bell? The modern day F-35. Yes. Also, spoiler, the findings from this aircraft testing in the 90s actually contributed in some small way to the modern day F-35. Let's rewind a bit. So I start seeing all these news articles, I see magazine covers, I'll just start putting in pictures, little article write-ups talking about the progression of the testing and the plane being put up in the wind tunnel. That's the most iconic picture with this plane. I probably used it for the thumbnail. The shot of this airplane on top of the little stands, pedestals, inside the massive Ames Research Facility wind tunnel being tested in 1990, roughly, I think this photo was taken. I mean, look at the people down there. That's not photoshopped. Like, those are actual scientists testing this plane in the wind tunnel, and they look like tiny little stick figures down there, and then here's this massive, massive jet towering over them. Like, this whole photo just looks fake. You wouldn't think that exists, but it does, because it's NASA, and that's the largest wind tunnel in the entire world, I'm pretty sure. So like I said, this was a huge collaboration project between the three countries. So you'll notice in the picture that there are these logos all over the plane. We got DARPA, we got de Havilland Canada, we have Boeing, we have NASA, of course, and lastly, we got General Dynamics in on this thing. So according to my research, correct me if I'm wrong, if you know all about the E7, please comment down below. General Dynamics was in charge of the design of this plane, hence why it looks like an F-16, because General Dynamics builds the F-16. So they clearly took some design cues from the F-16 to make this plane, which I think is so cool. That's why it looks so sick in the wind tunnel. And then we got de Havilland Canada in charge of the ejector system. Instead of that thrust going out the back like a standard jet, it redirects it down through these ejectors down to the ground. And then lastly, the UK government, I'm pretty sure, got with Rolls-Royce to supply the engine. Yes, spoiler alert, this plane is not just like a styrofoam test mule thing. It actually has a jet engine. Yes, this thing actually ran. It made incredibly loud noises, and it actually did something. This was not just a little Tonka toy sitting in the wind tunnel. This thing weighs like 40,000 pounds or more. They say actually maybe up to 50,000 pounds. It's 47 feet long, 34 feet wide, and 16 feet tall. The dimensions of a legit fighter jet that probably, if I had to guess, is similar to an F-16 dimension-wise. So after doing all that research, I was in. I wanted this airplane. I was going to win the auction. While the dimensions are ridiculously big, it was much smaller than the C-141 and the QSRA, so I'm like, okay. I passed on those two because the logistics weren't gonna work out, but this one I can certainly pull off. The starting bid was, I think, 99 cents. So I started bidding just 10 minutes before the end of the auction. I almost forgot about it. I was traveling, I was driving, and then my alarm goes off on my phone to bid on the NASA jet, and I'm like, oh shoot. So I quickly pull over to the side of the road, I hook up my hotspot to my laptop, I pull it up, and to my surprise, the plane was only at $175. And I'm like, okay, $175, 10 minutes to go. This thing is either gonna get bid up like crazy or I'm missing something. So I log in, I start placing some bids. Boom, I bid 200 bucks, I'm on top. Seconds later, the guy outbids me, 210. I go 220, he goes 230, 240. I'm like, man, this is gonna take forever. I'm willing to go up to like 10, 20,000 bucks for this thing, and we're only at 230 bucks. Like, this is gonna be a while. The auction gets to just 2 minutes remaining, and I'm like, what? But before I could get too excited, he bids again, 250 bucks. I'm like, all right, back to me, 260, like 1 minute to go. And all of a sudden, it goes quiet. He's not bidding. 50 seconds, 40 seconds, 30 seconds, 20 seconds, 10 seconds to go. And I'm high bidder at $260. So I'm doing the countdown in my head. It's the final countdown. 3, 2, 1, 0. Congratulations, you just won the E7 NASA jet. And I'm like, what? So again, I thought like something was wrong. I just couldn't believe that I bought this thing for 260 bucks. And then like a few minutes later, I get an email confirming that I'm the winner, and it sends me the invoice, says like, here's how to pay for it. And then it provided the information to coordinate picking it up. So later that night it sunk in, and I realized like, hey, okay, I just bought this thing. Now I gotta figure out what to do with it. So I was actually in San Jose the following week or something like that, and I coordinated with them to come take a look at it, to measure the dimensions, see it, feel it out, and go over the condition in person. All right, speaking of condition, obviously I can see from the pictures, I know this plane does not look how it used to look in the 90s. Of course, back in the 90s, it was brand new, it had fresh paint, it's up in the wind tunnel, it's inside, it's gonna look great. But as I found out, they were done with the testing in like 1993 range. They got their information they needed. They ultimately decided not to go forward with this exact design of VTOL on the F16. So unfortunately, nothing kind of further came of this design. They didn't like move forward with the next one or like, you know, actually producing the plane. Some of this information I know because I talked to somebody who worked on the project in the 90s. Super great guy if you're watching. Thanks for the information. He was telling me all about the plane. He's like, man, I have so many memories. It was like 2 a.m. I was running that plane in the wind tunnel. It was making so much noise, you know, it was so loud. And he said they really learned a lot through the data that they pulled from all the testing. And some of that was used, like I said, on future airplanes that are currently flying today. And some was used to know like what not to do, right? So obviously 1993 was put to the side. I think it was indoors for maybe a few years after that. And then they put it in the back lot, the back NASA lot. It's visible on Google Earth, which is crazy. I'll put up a picture of that. It sat there for years and years and years. So going into it, I knew the plane would be in rough condition. So please don't like bomb the comment section being like, oh, that thing's a piece of crap, like, rah, 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 it's horrible condition. Yeah, it's been outside for 25 years. Walking up to this plane for the first time was wild. I mean, yeah, I knew the dimensions were crazy, but like the scale as you walk up to it is like, this thing is huge. And just seeing all the different materials that were used, because this plane was never meant to fly, they of course just kind of used whatever materials would work for the design and making it look how they wanted to. So for instance, it's got some, I think it's got like steel for the spars, and then it's got sheets of aluminum covering most of the plane, and then the leading edge, because they needed a nice rounded leading edge, it's made out of just wood. All right, here it is. So the leading edge of the wing, they use this like wood, but then you go inboard, it's aluminum and steel. Here, see it's kind of hollow. That's thick. That's thin. Aileron area. Wow, all the electronics. Golly. Look at all this. Got these huge straps that they would use to hoist it in. Somebody could restore it. You could probably, you know, repaint it and have it look pretty nice again. But of course, the big money is in the engine. And I was really happy to see that it is fully like enclosed in the belly. There's no access besides the front inlet, which I was told was covered up until it blew off in some windstorm. They really did try to preserve it as best as possible. They also said when they parked it, they like pickled and preserved the engine in case they would ever need to use it again. So in theory, that jet engine might just one day be able to run again after 30 years of hibernation. Speaking of that jet engine, what exact jet engine is in there? You know, I said Rolls-Royce. You're probably wondering, what? So when I first won the bid, I had no idea what jet engine was in there. In fact, I didn't even know there was one in there. I was really hoping that it would still be in there, but after 25 years, you don't know what could be scrapped or taken for other projects. So I wasn't even sure if there would be a jet engine in there, but sure enough, they said, hey, here are the dimensions. And by the way, there is one jet engine inside the plane. It is a General Electric TF34-GE-100 turbofan type. And I was like, okay, I've never heard of a TF34-GE-100, so I looked that up, and what pops up? An A-10 Warthog. And I was like, holy crap. This NASA jet has the engine from an A-10 Warthog. I'm like, same thing I've ever heard. What? I just got an A-10 Warthog engine for $260. So I was thrilled about that. But after doing some more research and talking to that guy who was, you know, working on the program in the 90s, he told me, no, it's a Rolls-Royce Spey engine. So I'm like, okay, that makes more sense because the UK government was involved with this, so maybe they supply the engine. And then once I got up close and personal with it, while doing the walk around, I noticed that the fan blades are that iconic Gulfstream style of fan blades, and that would all make sense because guess what powers a Gulfstream G2, G3? The Rolls-Royce Spey engine. So sure enough, once I put all the pieces of the puzzle together, I confirmed that it indeed has a Rolls-Royce Spey Mark 511 engine. So regardless, that's still a pretty cool engine. It makes 11,400 pounds of thrust, and it was used to power the G2, the G3, and a bunch of other different aircraft. I mean, comment down below, but wouldn't there be well over $260 in value just in that engine? It's a low-time Rolls-Royce jet engine. Like, that's gotta be worth some money. I'm pretty sure some high-time ones that were removed from Gulfstreams are on eBay for like 10,000 bucks. So I figure this has gotta be worth at least that just for the engine alone. Anyway, that brings me to my closing thoughts of what do I do with this thing? Because I still haven't picked it up. I have to pick it up here very soon. I have some ideas, so let me quickly go over them with you. Okay, you guys gotta help me figure out what we do with this thing. We have a few different options. Option number one is we work with a museum to preserve it and possibly restore it and display it so that it can be shared with thousands of people. So believe it or not, Ames NASA Research Base has a museum on the field, maybe a mile and a half of where the plane is currently parked. They have an F16 in there, they have a U-2 spy plane, they have a bunch of cool NASA memorabilia. And I talked with the guy there, and he said they would be interested in it. They have a group of about 14 volunteers who restore all the airplanes that come into the museum. It's possible to get this thing restored how it was looking in the wind tunnel and have it on display. But he says that comes at an extremely high price. I mean, no doubt, restoring this thing would cost so much money. I'm down to put up a lot of the money. Maybe if we really vote to restore it, you guys gotta comment down below because I'm gonna go through all the answers and we're gonna like make a decision here. But if you all really wanna see it restored and preserved, maybe we can do like some sort of a GoFundMe where I put up the first big, large amount, and then if y'all have a couple bucks you wanna put into the deal, we take all that money, pool it together, and then we give it to this museum to help fund the material costs for getting this thing restored. They kind of said, maybe we can volunteer all the labor, but you cover the cost of materials, and then, you know, we restore it together as a little collaboration. That would be pretty cool. That'd be pretty cool. Oh, and by the way, that option would not require the cutting of the wings to transport it. But the second we want to take it back to Arizona, there's really no way around cutting off those wings, which is kind of sad, but at the end of the day, it's never gonna fly, so like it's not that big of a deal, but we would have to blowtorch like 8 feet of the wings off, as well as a little bit of the tail, because it's 16 feet and I don't think you can have that high on the highways. So taking it back to Arizona, or take it anywhere else for that matter, involves kind of chopping it up a little. Okay, not the end of the world if it's gonna be like reassembled. I'm sure you can repair it and put it back together. Option number 3 is, speaking of chopping it up, is to just like chop it up and scrap it. You keep the front end, you sell it to some guy who wants like an F16 looking cockpit thing, and then you keep the rear tail because it says NASA on it, and then you basically scrap the rest besides the engine. You keep the engine, and that's it. You know, that'd be probably the easiest thing to do because you're just chopping and trashing, but not ideal. And then maybe option number 4 would be to sell it to somebody who maybe watches this video and is dying to have some NASA artifact to put in their lawn or in their man cave, in their garage. I don't know. So if you're watching this right now going, that would be perfect to add to my airplane collection, then feel free to reach out. If the price is right, we might just agree to sell it to you. So please, if you fall into any of those categories, shoot us an email, jrgarage22@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. If you're otherwise, please be sure to drop a comment down below with your thoughts and with your comments about this crazy, crazy purchase. Also be sure to comment down below. If you were in my shoes, would you have bought this for $260? Do you think that was a smoking deal? Or was this a terrible idea and $260 is gonna be the least of my worries when I have a $25,000 transportation bill to get this thing added? I already know there's gonna be some wise guy in the comments.
You couldn't pay me enough to take that airplane off your hands. No wonder it went for so little money, because you're gonna be stuck with that paperweight. And that thing's gonna financially bankrupt you trying to do something with it. You're such an idiot for buying that. I wouldn't even take it if they paid me 20 grand.
Okay, yeah, there's always that guy in the comments. So anyway, there you have it. I can't wait to see the comments on this video. I know they're going to be entertaining and probably informative, and I'm just really hoping that somebody who knows all about this plane or the QSRA or the C-141 chimes in. Thank you guys for watching. Stay tuned to part 2, removing the airplane from its current resting spot. We're gonna be doing that very soon. Hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you for watching. See you in the next one.